let me start with a karakia and then a little bit of a mihi, and then we'll get into our kaupapa for tonight. This is one of my favorite karakia tīmata from the book He Rau Orewa, nā tōku tino hoa Wairora te moni. He wahine ata hua ia. Me karakia tātou. Kopu mai te ata. Tomokia mai te rā, tomokia mai rā e. He ata mātou o tō ata whai. He ata mātou o te tika i a koe. E whai ana te maramatanga. E whai ana te pono. Te kāmaka, te pā, te kai whakaora. Whakawhirinaki mai ki a mātou i te aetangi. Whakawhirinaki ki a hare. Whakawhirinaki ki a koa. E te atua, mau tono hoki tau mahi tohu. Aene, ake tonu atu. So let the womb of the earth labour the day until the sun is birthed. We endeavour to do what is right and good, a reflection of your example. We seek wisdom and understanding, so lead us by the light of your truth. We take refuge in you, our standing place, our saving grace. As day dawns, we bathe in your warm rays with gratitude and joy. Lord God, your steadfast love endures forever, from this time on and forevermore. Amen. Amen. Karakia tīmata I te mutunga o te rā. So it's a karakia to start, a kaupapa, which talks about the start of the day, but at the end of the day. But hei aha, it's all good. Ko tēnei te mihi tuatahi ki te atua I te rangi, nana mia katoa. Ki a koe anō hoki e te atua, kei te mihi, kei te mihi, kei te mihi ki a koe. Kia koutou mā, kua hui hui mai nei ki te kaupapa nei, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa ki te manu tiria I te wainganui a tātou, ko Anna, ngā mihi ki a koe anō hoki, kia ora tātou. Hey, it is so lovely to have you all join with us tonight, and special acknowledgement to you, Anna. It's lovely to have you with us. If you don't know what you've joined, this is Arosha's conservation kōrero, where once a quarter we focus in on what Christian conservation and Christians in conservation looks like, and what the relationship between those two kaupapa are. A long time ago, we used to describe it as conservation and hope, and I love that way of talking about the work of Arosha, and Anna is someone who embodies that. So it is absolutely incredible to have her with us tonight. The rough flow of the evening is going to be, I'm going to loosely interview Anna, and then at the end of that interview, there'll be time for questions. But if you have questions throughout the kaupapa, feel free to type them into the chat. If your question's particularly good, I might ask Anna directly, but I won't she doesn't need to, I'll make sure she doesn't need to sit here reading the chat all night so that she can just share her story with us. But ngā mihi nui anō ki a koutou katoa. It's so lovely to have you all with us, and I won't fill up the space with any more talking. In November last year, I lied when I said I won't fill up the space with any more talking. Let me do a little bit more talking before I hand over to Anna. In November last year, whilst recording the 4th season of Ngāhere, I had the absolute privilege of getting to meet Anna, and she took Andrew and Waiora and myself out to Moko Moko Dryland Sanctuary. And so I've had the privilege of visiting there, and having the privilege of seeing Anna in that space, sharing with joy and enthusiasm and passion her love for that place particularly, but her love for the creatures that place shelters. And so when we were thinking about who we wanted to talk to about Arosha and conservation and this kōrero, the first person that came to mind right at the start of this year was, we have to hear from Anna. So Anna, it's so amazing to have you with us tonight, and I can't wait for this ropu to hear a bit of your story of how you got involved in the sanctuary, and who you are, how you got involved in the sanctuary, what your work looks like, how faith and conservation fit together for you, and we can't wait to hear about the book that you ended up writing as a result of this journey that God's led you on. So ngā mihi nui ki a koe. Thank you for being with us tonight. I'll hand over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got involved in this kaupapa?
Sure. Thank you, James, and kia ora koutou. It's lovely to be here tonight and to meet you all in some way. So yeah, I am about to turn 40 this year. I'm a mum in Alexandra in Central Otago, and I've got 3 young kids. So Tan is nearly 10, got another Jessie who's 7, and Emily, and she's nearly 5. So they are a big part of my life, and my husband Ollie is a teacher here at the school. So yeah, that's my basic life. That gives a lot of structure to my life, as I say. But recently, probably for the last 5 or so years, I have been following up my interest in writing. So I studied geography at university. I did a BA in geography. Although it's a very wide, it was really a BA in anything that interests me, but geography was my major, so I took a lot of different papers. But at the other end of that, I did some study in early childhood teaching, and I taught for a few years in that too, and I enjoyed that. But I knew it wasn't really my career for my life. But getting in with my own young family, I started to think more, and I began to study, do some distance study through Otago Uni and creative nonfiction writing and for science communication. And that I thought, yeah, that's really something that I love, and I learned a lot through what I was studying. So that began me on all this. But yeah, to go on from that, when my interest and my connection with lizards and with the sanctuary began. So certainly, I mean, it comes out, of course, comes out of a lifetime, and more than a lifetime. It comes out of enjoying the natural world, and that's something I was brought up to do. We'd always get outdoors as a family on our holidays and other places. My dad, he's loved birds. He studied the kakapo, and he was on some of the teams back in the 1970s where they were looking for the last remaining kakapo in
Wow.
Fiordland. So he was out
Wow.
there with Don Merton and Rod Morris and some other people out there. And he loved that work, and he did his masters in that. But then he felt called pretty much immediately after that, called to become a Presbyterian minister. So he studied at Knox and Dunedin. So that was my background. So as I grew up, he was a church minister, but I also knew that he loved birds, and he would share that a bit with us when we were out and about. But I must admit, I was pretty useless at hearing them and knowing where they were, and he would point them out, and I'd look up, and I wouldn't see much. So I think while I loved being outdoors and I loved the landscapes, I didn't really feel that I was very good at the wildlife stuff. I hadn't really become like, I sort of loved animals in theory. I thought I might be a wildlife photographer in Africa or something like that, but I hadn't really, I hadn't connected in a very practical way with New Zealand's wildlife. They still felt a bit inaccessible. And certainly that was birds even, but lizards, I hadn't come across lizards at all. I mean, inaccessible, that would be, that'd be very much a word I'd say. That's probably how I saw lizards for very long time. Suppose I knew they were there, but in that way you might see a little fast flick of brown off the side of a walking track, it's gone. I didn't feel like there's any way that I would be able to connect with that. And I'd seen green geckos in a display cage at Zealandia Sanctuary, I think. I thought, oh yeah, they're cool, but that was about it. So it wasn't a part of my life at all, really, until it was nearly 6 years ago now, and I was doing this study. I'd done 2 papers of my course of science communication, distance. This third paper, I needed to do an internship, had to find a scientist in Alexandra who had some writing for me to do. And my husband put me in touch with a scientist called Grant Norbury, and he's an ecologist with Manaaki Whenua Land Care Research. And so I talked to him, and he said, oh, I don't have anything really with my work, but I am the chair of this local trust, and we've got this lizard sanctuary on the edge of town. I was like, oh, do you? Okay, it's cool. I'd lived there for 5 years in town, and, I loved outdoors and was into conservation theory, but I hadn't even realized that. So that was me at that time, but I thought this sounds quite neat. He wanted a bunch of material. He said, the website's so out of date, could you just write us some stuff? We want to educate people about the Central Otago drylands, what this place really was. And we've got all these lizard species there. We want someone to be able to write about them and to write the story of our trust and of our sanctuary and share that with the public. So I was like, okay, that does sound good. I could do that. So that was the beginning. I spent a few weeks first So I had a wee 2.5-year-old at that stage and a slightly older kid. So I had only a little slot of time each week, but I started to research these things, and I was just reading about these. I was like, what, we had a local skink, sort of, it was a foot long, 30 centimeters, and they were out at the sanctuary. That's remarkable. I didn't know about these. Um, so that went on a few weeks, and I was just reading the stuff that the guy would give me, and I'd sort of turn it into more interesting writing. I was like, this is amazing. And then finally, she got to get out there after about a month. And the Department of Conservation, they were doing their annual skink survey. They were going to count how many. It had only been a year that they had these introduced. That introduced their Otago skinks back into the fence, and their grand skinks, which are about 25 centimeters long, so only slightly smaller. Beautiful animals too, sort of shiny black with little gold flecks along their backs. These big skinks onto the schist rock tors in the sanctuary, and they were needing to find how many of these skinks seem to have survived their first year, were they settling in, that kind of thing. And they said, oh, well, you come along, you could volunteer, we could give you a camera. And I remember saying, I don't know a thing about finding lizards. And they said, oh, you're a good outdoorsy person, you'll be fine, you'll learn. So they gave me a camera with a 300mm lens, and that first day, one of the dock rangers, Sasha, she just spent an hour or two with me and talked me through what you're looking for, how you walk up to a rock outcrop that looks likely. It's got sunny ledges and good crevices, bit of native vegetation that could be a good spot. You stop about 4 meters away, you scan it, look for anything that's sort of shiny, a little bit more cylindrical, whereas the rock will be sort of more flat, sort of sharp edges. If it looks slightly lizardy like that, and then you'll get your camera out and you'll zoom at that. And so gave me a few tips like that. Move smoothly, move slowly like that. They'll startle if you have jerky movements. And so then sent me off, and I wandered around for about half an hour thinking, yeah, no, there's no way I can find these things. And then suddenly I saw one of these. It was a grand skink, and it was on this ledge above the Alexandra Basin in the morning sun, and its body was sticking out from a rock crack, probably about this far out, its
Wow.
head and its shoulders, this beautiful gleaming kind of curve, and it was just sitting up there basking in the sun. When I had my camera on it, and you could zoom in and you could see this dark eye of the skink, and its head was kind of cocked looking up at me with its bright dark eye. And yeah, I just was like, wow, I just was hooked. And I just connected there, I think, with something that I hadn't before, and that these animals are remarkable. And this is our fauna of the basin, this place that I already love. I love Central Otago, very connected. I love that rock, that landscape already, but then just to realize, wow, these are the animals that are designed to live in this place. And
Wow.
here they are, me and them on this beautiful spring morning. And that was really important for me. Um, you could probably share a photo of what one's first. I don't mind if it's a sanctuary or if it's me with a jeweled gecko. Either way, there's me with a jeweled gecko. So another lizard, but it was probably a few weeks later, going out in the evening and looking through the shrubs in the gully with someone else who was very good at finding these geckos, because it's quite tricky. He was looking as well. But this one I actually found myself in a torch beam climbing through. This is a coprosma shrub, a great wee dryland shrub with tiny little leaves and really twiggy kind of thing. And there was this jeweled gecko, and I was able to hold the gecko, as you can see, and like the feel of it there on me, it was like still a little bit warm, I think, from the day's sun. Its wee fingers gripping on my fingers, the softness of its skin just really struck me. And as you can see, yeah, just be able to look at it close, its beautiful big eyes, and feel its wee heart thumping away. So there's some pretty formative encounters for me, I think. That was yeah, face to face, close enough to be able to engage this and this feeling of wonder, I suppose, and just amazement that I could have lived for 35 years and not known about these creatures. Felt like I was the local, connected to the landscape, but had missed this whole chunk of what our fauna was here. So that was really powerful.
I'm really interested in that word wonder because you've used that word a few times. you know, you said that when you were young, you had like a real love for nature and you'd be outside and you had a real sense of awe. And now you've used that term wonder as well. And I think this photo that you're showing us captures it so beautifully. It seems to me like that sense of wonder is the starting place for wanting to really care for something. Has that
Mm,
been your experience, and is that something that you've seen other people experience as well?
sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say definitely for me. And the difference between learning about, reading about these things, thinking they're amazing, but to get out there and to connect myself, to find them myself. I don't know. There was some kind of, yeah, uh, but yeah, in terms of the actual, yeah, just I did just marveled at these creatures and how they live and how I've learned so much about them and how unique the ones in New Zealand are, which is just mind blowing. And yeah, so that's huge. And we absolutely love taking people out to the sanctuary and seeing them have a similar experience to what I had, to see them, yeah, maybe unsure that they're going to know how to find a lizard out there, but then to have them actually be able to see these big skinks. So yeah, here's James has put up a picture of what it's like inside the sanctuary. So we're talking about the Moko Moko Dryland Sanctuary where I've spent this time. So we're 10 kilometres up in the hills sort of behind Alexandra. It's just 14 hectares enclosed in a fully predator proof fence. And it consists of a one main gully. Here I'm on one side of the gully on some schist rocks looking across at the other side. This photo, usually there's nobody else here, by the way. Most of my time at the sanctuary is a lonely, beautifully lonely time of wandering in the sun with the lizards. This is a lovely gathering of people we had just last week, last Tuesday. The trust who have established the sanctuary are turning 20 years old last week. So we had a lovely celebration with a bunch of volunteers and trustees. Um, we had some cake and some champagne, and we looked for lizards and we had speeches, and it was really nice. But yeah, that is the place where we wander, and the lizards live on these big rock tours. The big skinks live on there. Um, yeah,
Sorry, I'd love to ask you a question about that. So the trust has been around for 20 years, but I imagine that the trust came before the sanctuary. So there's some long-sightedness there where people have realized that there's these species that need to be protected, but then there's been a huge amount of work to actually establish the infrastructure and the funding and the organizing to actually make that a reality. There's something in that speaks to um, just the long arc of conservation as an approach. But would you be able to tell us a little bit about the backstory of the trust?
absolutely. And yeah, the same. What you've just mentioned is just another thing that wows me about it all. That is, yeah, 20 years. So from them forming with that vision of sort of bringing, restoring a bit of the dryland ecosystem in the Alexandra Basin, because in New Zealand, our drylands and our lowlands, both of these are really poorly protected in general. You know, there's not many, we've done quite well with national parks that include our forested areas and our mountains. But out east, we had such a we had a beautiful dryland forest too, just of different, this is Kōwhai and Totara and Kānaka and the Aleria, the big tree daisies and the things like this, and more open areas as well. It was a mosaic of forest and shrubland and open clearings with a lot of moa stamping through it, and the haast eagle and the lizards and all these other lot of birds too. There'd be the kērero and the kaka and the kia, the kiwi, they were all there. So it's a wonderful part of the country and very unique, but not well protected. So that was the vision of the trust, to do something here in a landscape where it hasn't really been done, to do something that focuses on lizards because they were such a big part of this ecosystem here. And but yeah, they started slowly. They started with tossing around a lot of ideas of exactly what that would look like. Some of their early work involved in trying to captive breed and rear a population of Otago skinks. There was a lot of learning involved there. They did a bunch of public education. I'm going to schools, there was various people did some artwork around town. They made a float for the the annual Blossom Festival parade, things like that, just doing some groundwork. And yeah, they also began quite early on, they did choose a site for the sanctuary, and they began to first work there was to cut the briar rose. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but down south here in the high country, it's a real pest species. It's a prickly, it has those red rose hips on it, and that, you know, that was in the gully of the sanctuary, 5 metre high briar, and they were cutting it by hand and pasting a poison on it. So I mean, this all happened before my time, and it's wonderful. They gathered, just the groups from the community to do those field days. They yeah, there was a and so the chair of the trust grant, he's been involved all the way through, and as a scientist, it's always been very driven by a scientific approach, and that it's very research based, very just wanting to learn as much as they can through it, and to use really good research and to make it work really well, and they've managed to do that. So
And so
yeah,
how long has the sanctuary been operating now?
yeah. So the big predator-proof fence finished 2015, but then the declarative predators, the lizard, so there were 3 smaller skink species already in that landscape, and we can find them still around on the outskirts of Alexandria. It's had those 3 inside the fence. They've since reintroduced 4 other species that they know were there in the basin, right there, but they have been lost regionally to the region in the last sort of decades. So those introductions started in 2018. So you'd say the real sort of work of the sanctuary as such began in 2018 with jeweled geckos, Otago skinks, grand skinks. So it's pretty fresh, and I came along just a year after those introductions. So on that doc survey that I was talking about, and later that summer we started to see the first babies that had been born of this sanctuary, these new individuals in the sanctuary. So I kind of came along for the fun stuff, really, not for cutting the 5 metre briar. So I always feel a little bit cheeky. It's something I've now a big part of, but where I wasn't in that the original crew, but I enjoyed putting together just a wee 6 minute sort of photo film thing of from celebrating their time from those early years, and looking at that work that's gone in and how many people have been involved through there to get it to what it is now.
And so you originally got involved as part of the sort of science writing paper that you were doing, and you helped them update their website. And then you reasonably quickly transitioned to actually being quite involved in lots of the actual practical hands-on work
Mm.
at the sanctuary. So what does that work look like? What do you do? What do other people do? What does it look like to take other people into the space?
Sure. Yeah. Um, So some of my favorite days are when I go lizard spotting, and this just feels like fun, but it also does have a useful purpose, because we're keeping track of that population that's been translocated in, those populations. The Otago skinks and the grand skinks are um, and looking for any new young that are born. And because they've all got individual markings, and I'm photographing the portion of their body between their snout and their forelimb along the side, left side and a right side of each skink that I see out basking. And then I go home later in the evening and I match them on our database. So I know which individuals we've seen. And if it's a young one, I know if that's one we already knew of, or if it's a new baby to add to our record. So that's lovely work. I love those days. But also, I do some work every month. I'm out there checking for mice, because mice are a huge issue for lizards, and keeping mice out is our most difficult predator they're the hardest predator to keep out of these fences. So I have a loop that I walk every month, checking some tracking tunnels, and also some little boxes I have with just a non-toxic sort of pellet bait thing that you can see if mice have been in and chewed, and left droppings as well. So mixture of those things. And so then I do other work out there when it's needed, help cut some tracks or marking some various things. And the other lovely thing I enjoy doing is showing people around. So you could show a photograph here, James. Yeah, so here's some kids. These guys are actually friends of ours, and it's a sanctuary. We're not yet ready to take school groups around, sadly. I would love to be able to do that, maybe at some stage, but it's steep and rough, and you'd need really small numbers anyway, so that if you're going to have a good experience. But what we have been able to do is take some of our friends' families and their kids and things, and my own kids who love it. And yeah, just the wonder of for these people when they get to see and to touch the lizards is wonderful. The
So you
next
were
one,
saying each lizard has a unique marking. So do you know that lizard's name?
no, this is a wee schist gecko. So these are ones that we don't monitor individually. They
Okay.
would have unique margins. We could photograph them. These ones, so Iris was saying about the really the news story that's come up in the last week on TV1 and things about the oldest wild geckos in the world are living on an island off the Canterbury coast. So they're a very closely related species. They're cousins of this schist gecko here. We've got
Ah,
geckos the length of the country in the same family, in the same genus. Um, and so we know this one here could be 50 or 60 years old, so
wow.
that's the length of time that they're living, which is just wonderful. They're a wee nocturnal gecko, so different from the skinks that I'm photographing. Here's more a typical group of an adult, scene of an adult group enjoying these grand skinks. So when you're looking for the skinks here, you're not hands-on with them. That's something that you're looking at. Great to have binoculars or cameras to really get that feeling of exactly what they look like. And yeah, it's lovely. So sometimes it's just individuals that contact us asking to come out. Other times it's a tour group or a group of scientists who are visiting the area or something. And to be able to take them around is just really special. So we're not sort of run. It's not like a Zealandia or an Orokonui or a sanctuary where many people come and visit. It is more just by arrangement. Myself or Grant can show people around. So it's always a sort of small, intimate kind of feeling thing, and people I think love that feeling. There aren't really tracks there either, which I was saying to some visitors recently. I've really got to cut some tracks for you guys, sorry. And they're like, no, we love this. We feel like we're not just at some zoo wandering around looking. We're like really engaged with this place. We feel like we're in the wilds, stomping around, encountering these lizards. And so, okay, that's nice. It's still a rough place and a small place, but I think people appreciate that, the ones that we're able to share it with.
It is a beautiful place. It feels very, very special. I've been very privileged to be there. I want to ask you a slightly loaded question, and it's going to be in two parts, and then I'll let you speak to it. But I think they're related questions. The first one's slightly loaded in that it's so why does protecting and caring for lizards matter? And that question is related to the larger question, like what is the relationship between your faith and working for lizards? Because I think those questions are probably connected.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Something I read that just it was only about a week or two ago was this phrase, every creature is a word of God. And that one really hit me. Thought I've never heard
Wow.
it phrased quite like that before. It was actually by, as I researched the guy who said it, it's Meister Eckhart, who I think some of what he said got into the
Eckhart
realm of
Tolle.
yeah, of like, yeah, okay, he's a bit of a heretic. So like, oh, okay, maybe. And I thought about that phrase, and I thought, does that still ring true? And I thought, in the creation story, yeah, I think we can say that. God spoke, and these creatures came into being, and every creature is a word of God. I thought that was beautiful. So there's that honoring of life and of creatures, and I think lizards have really captured me because they've had so much, they're small, they're so easy to miss. And I think to me, something about that, and yeah, that resonates, I think, with my faith and with my understanding of Jesus and the kind of things that he spoke about that, the least of these, the ones that we don't give much consideration to generally. Um, these things matter, the last will be first, these kind of things. And they've got these little creatures out there that have had such a hard time since humans have arrived in this country. And particularly recently with the Europeans and the mammal predators and the huge changes of habitat. And they haven't been well recognized or protected or even celebrated. But they're incredible, and they're just quietly trying to live out their lives there, and they are just beautifully yeah, they just fit there wherever they're living. They're just so beautifully adapted to that kind of way of life. We've got so many different, different types of lizards and species that just fit all our landscape. From the ones that are on the rocky shores diving into rock pools and feeding there, to the ones that are up high in the field and mountains, ones in the scree fields, the sand dunes, the forests. They're just everywhere living life in these really unique, marvelous ways that which I just find really, really stunning. So that's part of an answer to that one, James, about why they matter to I yeah, what I think the work with the sanctuary in that place, I love going into that place. They said I connected with the central Otago landscape when I was really young as a holiday place. I actually lived in Timaru, but we came through every holiday, and it's where I first really adventured. So it's always been important to me. But to be in that in the main gully of the sanctuary and the rock, those big bluffs around me and things, and I do sometimes think of that word sanctuary. I think how lovely that we use that word that has those connotations. Sanctus, what they call the area of the church where you gather to worship, a sanctuary. It's a beautiful place. I feel very worshipful when I'm there. Something I like about it too, I think, which resonates with my faith, is the hope aspect, that even the slightly unlikely kind of part of the hope that, and the fact that there are people who are committing so much to this place when it would be so easy to just look around the whole basin there and say, look at all the problems, look at those big dairy farms that are just irrigating this dry land and polluting the river. Look at how much is going wrong here. What's the point of 14 hectares behind a fence? Why does it matter? And to me, those are like, that's exactly the kind of stuff that as Christians, we believe the little things matter. We believe the stuff does matter. Certainly like that for me. So all that resonates, very much for me.
Yeah, I love that. I've been thinking a lot recently about, um, you know, there's lots of talk through the Gospels, especially where Jesus talks about the poor, and often the word he uses for the poor in Greek is this word ani, A-N-I, ani, which means more than just poor. It means powerless. It means people that don't have the ability to influence their outcomes for themselves. And I've been thinking about how many endangered animals fit into that category, And then I was also thinking about Matthew 25, Matthew 25, whatever we do for the least of these, we do for
Mm.
God. And we often, I'm obviously like bending this to the absolute extreme because this isn't what Jesus actually talks about. But I have been thinking about what it looks like for us to act on behalf of creatures and animals that don't have we've taken away their power to influence their own outcome, and we're acting on their behalf to support their needs, hopes, desires, aspirations. I know that's like a big stretch what I'm saying, but what I have heard you say just then is that because of the impacts of human engagement on the land, these animals have been. Here's my little boy. Hey, buddy. These animals have really had their habitat removed, and they haven't had really anyone to advocate for them because birds are just so much prettier, and more obvious, and their wings are so much flappier. I'm using all the technical terms right now. But have you got any observations or thoughts or experiences of sort of thinking about how your work aligns to advocating for something that can't advocate for themselves?
Hmm. Certainly rings true what you're saying. I think that's something that's caught me. The feeling like this is I want to speak for these animals and to share them because that um, hasn't been done heaps. I don't want to say I'm the first, not at all. So that's something that I do really appreciate about the work. Yeah. So I think I talked to you about when I was out at the sanctuary. Another thing that really makes sense to me, or something I like about this kind of work. Uh, So when I was when I was a university student doing my very muddly BA, I took a paper in New Testament with exegesis, looking at Mark. It was just Mark chapter 1 to 3, I think. But we looked in depth, and my lecturer was Paul Trebilco, he was wonderful, I thought. But there's something he was talking about. We talked so much about the kingdom of God and what they meant, and he talked about the miracles, because there are a lot of miracles in that, and what they meant and what they're about. And it struck, I just always remember him saying that the miracles, they were two things at the same time. They were a sign of the coming of the kingdom, but they also mattered in themselves right there in that place to those
Hmm.
people. So when he healed someone who was paralyzed, it's because he cared about that person. That really mattered right there in that day in Palestine with that person. But it was also a sign of a later healing. And when I was thinking about this, a wee while ago, and I thought, this is how I understand our sanctuary spaces in New Zealand.
I love that.
I see them as a sign, of what we are hoping for, a sign of restoration. It's that sign of hope and of, our restored earth. But they also matter here, they really matter to those 7 species of lizard that we've got protected inside that place, who are now able to live on those rocks, to be able to raise their young, and to be able to be there, being their beautiful selves, and us to be able to come and as people to be able to say, wow. And when I can bring people in and they can also say, wow, we never knew this, and it's a really powerful thing, a beautiful expression of God's creative, wonderful creator God and what he's made here. And we can enjoy that. So both,
I love
make
I
some
love
kind
that
of,
so much. It matters in the here and now, like it literally matters to these lizards in this
mm,
picture that we're looking at.
mm,
Are these, yeah, and it's foreshadowing the restoration of all things. So it's like pointing towards a future at the exact same time.
mm, yeah, that's
What
what
what are
makes.
we looking at in this picture?
This is an Otago skink. It'll be the large one would be a mother, and some young. I think probably one closest to her is probably is a bit older, maybe a year older, and then the other 3 younger ones. But actually, this is not a picture from our sanctuary. This is from one at McRae's, where they have,
Oh, wow.
and they've been going a lot longer. And there's this beautiful picture of them all basking together. Our numbers aren't quite up there yet. We've occasionally seen a couple basking together, but I just love this photograph of, so it's, this Otago, the Otago skinks, this family of them. Mm.
So what I hear you saying is the work that you're doing at Moko Moko will eventually provide a sanctuary or a space where the numbers can get up to the point where this type of picture that we're looking at will become a reality in your space?
I really hope so. Yeah, I'm just thinking, well, yeah, yeah. I've managed to snap the odd photo with, two in it, so far. But our numbers are still, so they put in 43 Otago skinks, 33 grand skinks. We've counted about 50 babies of each species.
Wow.
Um, but it's in quite a big space, so they are still quite spread out. Um, Super encouraging. When you look at the graphs of the population growth and things over the last 5 years, everything's tracking as it should, but it takes a lot of time. So yeah, we don't have rocks bulging with lizards yet, but we hope that we know, they're on the right track. It's just still very early.
So
Mm.
before I ask you to talk a little bit about your book and how that came into being and what the process of that was like, just sort of one last question on this relationship between uh, conservation and faith. For a long time, and we still do at Arosha, we talk about Arosha being conservation and hope. What do you think the relationship between those two things is from your experience at Moko Moko?
But you just need to have hope, and that for me to work in a place like that, that is, I can do something practical and I can be out there in the landscape and I can be out there with creatures, with some other people, and I can do something, get my hands dirty, breathe, as I'm marching around the place. For me, this engages, yeah, I engage positively with that, and there are these encouraging signs, as I say, of the lizard populations going up. So to me, this is a very kind of, I don't know, an embodied kind of hope sort of feeling, and that's important for me, because otherwise I would plunge into despair probably if I just looked at the big picture and I just looked at the news and I just looked at yeah, you guys know all this, you know, all the data out there is that the overall trajectory is pretty grim. So for me to to be able to focus in something and to engage there in a small local hopeful project with others in the landscape is my way of, yeah, of keeping myself really living out that hope and connecting with that.
I love that term, embodied hope. The opposite of it is disembodied hope, which is kind of like conceptual hope that's not landed in anything pragmatic. And so embodied hope is when you're somehow taking what you believe about reality and the future of the world, and then you're doing something tangible to make that hope become a reality. I think that's what you mean by embodied hope. Does that kind of capture
Good, James. Yeah, no, it's definitely open for elaboration, and
it?
it was just an idea, really. Yeah, I think it's a good term for what I'm talking about there. Yeah, yeah, thanks.
That's absolutely been my experience, even in the small projects that I've been in, is feeling really disillusioned with lots of stuff that's happening. But in a small space and in a small way, I can actually partner with God and partner with the community to make a tangible difference that matters to that place and to those species and to that ecosystem. And so, whilst I feel often yeah, quite disillusioned by the rest of things when I'm in that space. I'm like, well, at least it matters to this.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I find myself embodying the hope to the space, but then the space gives hope back to me. I don't, do you experience that in the sanctuary?
Yeah, definitely. As I say, it's a place that really fills my cup in a lot of ways. Um, Being out there and the beauty of these creatures and things, what they give back to me in there, and what what that place, that sanctuary's given to me and my family. That's huge. It's enriched our life a lot, and yeah, yeah. So absolutely, it's a to and fro. Mm.
It's amazing. It really was a privilege to be there. I'm assuming that if anyone on this call makes their way all the way to Alexandra and tracks you down, you might take them out into the sanctuary
I'll
if they
do
ask
my
really,
very
really
best.
nicely.
It'd be a real pleasure. Please do come south. Love to. Spring and autumn are the best. Spring's the best, actually. Mm.
Autumn in Central Otago is pretty beautiful though.
Lovely.
It's
It
pretty
is.
amazing. So
Mm.
you did your BA and then you went to do some more science writing and then you stumbled into this project and helped them to rewrite their website. The website is amazing, by the way. It's beautiful and super informative, so you can go and check that out. And then you got involved in some of the conservation stuff. And I imagine that what happened is you just fell in love. And like anyone who falls in love, you want to share your love with the world around you. And you've given birth to a beautiful book. Can you tell us about that journey
Mm.
and what has happened since you've written the book? So tell us about how you decided to start writing it, what that process was like, what's happened since you released the book. Tell us the story.
Oh, thanks, James. Um, yeah, so I was still studying, as I say, when I was yeah, falling in love with lizards. So a book wasn't the first thing that jumped to mind, but I knew I wanted to share it. James said, right? So I wrote some articles for Forest and Bird, North and South, worked on something for New Zealand Geographic. So they were really big deals for me. And I was as a student, so I worked really hard on these things, and I was enjoying that. But something quite in my story, which was really key, was that this was only about 4 months after I'd been first at the sanctuary. I was still doing this work for the trust, and the World Congress of Herpetology, so that's the study of reptiles and amphibians, that was being held in Dunedin by chance that year. So it's only about a couple of hours down the road. So the trust said, well, how about, we'll support you to go along to that conference for a couple of days. I was just like, wow, thanks. That'll be wonderful, So as a young science communicator, I'm not that young, I mean an inexperienced one at least. Um, so I said yes to that and I went along. And it was just incredibly powerful for me. And it was there that I started hearing really one after the other. So through the week that had presentations by herpetologists from all around the world sharing about their their country's snakes and lizards and frogs and things, and what research was going on. But the final day of the conference was dedicated to New Zealand's lizards. So there was presentation after presentation, not just 15 minutes long, but I was sitting listening to them. And these stories were they really just struck me. And I'd like to share a couple of them, because then I think you might sort of maybe get a bit of an understanding of why I got captured by them and what it was. So I have a photo from one of those. I think there'll be a guy on a scree slope. Here we go. There's a guy called Kerry Knox. So he was presenting, and his one was about discovering lizards, or some that bit. So just in the mountains, not that far from Alexandra, that's called Aotearoa Conservation Area, and it's in behind sort of, I don't know if you know the area, but Ranfurly or Marama, between those two. Anyway, it's big hills not far from us, but in the 5 years just previously, 4 new lizard species had been found just in this one mountain range that looked so unlikely. And he was talking about this, and I was amazed by that, but I was also something about him talking about this, and I realizing the kind of persistence that was involved in these people's searches, the weeks that they'd spend, as you see, groveling around like this in these places with not much to kind of to keep them going, and but then realizing, their excitement and how much they, why were they doing this? But seeing how excited they'd be when they'd find one of these lizards, and their real delight in that. And yeah, someone said to me, if you're a herpetologist looking for lizards, you spend 95% of your time not finding lizards, but you live for that 5% that you do. I was just realizing that the number of these scientists, they were putting in the real hard yards for these little creatures. And something I think in that resonated with what we we're talking about before, just this feeling of really caring for something that nobody else had really put in the time into to even finding. We'd been knowing about these things. And I was just quite touched by that. None of these scientists were Christians, I don't think. But to me, it was a beautiful thing that they were doing, finding about these and sharing about them and putting decades of their lives, and no one really knew about what they're up to, but that's what they did. So that was one of the stories that I loved. And then there was another story that was about, the next one is this woman, Lynn. Oh, so that's one of the creatures that was one of the lizards that was found up in the Aotearoa in 2018, the Huruta'au gecko.
This image is amazing. It is a stunning image.
Yeah. So yeah, not discovered till 2018.
Wow.
And it's named now the Huruta'au gecko, meaning that is the words meaning to reveal, also the breaking of the dawn. So is a name gifted because of the bright lips, a bit like a sunrise, but also the way it stayed hidden from us for so long, but had revealed itself now. And its back is like a galaxy of stars. Its scientific name it's got Galaxius in it because of that. But one of only 2 species in New Zealand. So, by the way, I probably should have said this sometime earlier. We've got 125 species now of native geckos and skinks we know of, but only 2 have black eyes like this.
Wow.
So yeah, pretty exciting that they're finding these new species, but it's only after a whole lot of work. Yeah, but the next one was another story that just to give you an understanding of what I was sort of sitting through. This is a woman called Lynn Adams, another scientist. So she says she's holding a wee skink. It's called the Kapatia skink. She's on the west coast. This is a little bit south of Hokitika. And got knee pads on because she's spent a lot of time kneeling here. And you can't actually see in this photo, there's they're monitoring these skinks, and the way they, it takes a lot of work to try and find these little skinks in the grass, and they put down little bits of corrugated roofing material, a sort of a foot by foot square of that. They stack a couple up, and the skinks will come and bask in them. So you can go and flip up them to try and find your skinks, see how many are there, but they're so fast when they've been basking that Lynn developed the fish bin with the cutout bottom to put the fish bin around the treat, and then you flip it up, and then at least the skink's only bouncing off the walls of this bin while you try and grab the thing. So they'd spent 3 summers in this little area, because this species, it only lives in, it's a 1 kilometre long stretch, and it's only 5 metres wide, and it's of this long rank grass got the dairy farms on the east, and the Tasman Sea and its beach on the west. So it's all together, yes, 5 meters wide, tiny space where the species live. So they were doing some monitoring, visiting again and again, but they had, and they estimated the population was about 200 of these wee skinks. But Cyclone Fahey came through about 6 months before before we met this conference, and just in one night there was a big storm surge combined with the king tide, and about half the skink's habitat just got washed away overnight. And to have her talking about that and sharing what that was like for them and how much they cared, and they were then at that stage also talking about what they were doing about that, and they were negotiating with the farmer to maybe just keep stock off just one wee corner of his paddock to let it go back to long grass to give them a wee bit more room. They were taking some of the skinks up to Auckland Zoo to try and breed them safely there. So they're trying to figure out what to do with them. And again, I just felt so moved that there was a species, and realized there's quite a few of these that have been so pushed out by the way that we've been living on the land. They've got down to this tiny little scrap of space, and they're just getting hammered on one side from this rising sea level, and they've got the other side agriculture coming in, but they're somehow managing to hang on there. And then you've got these scientists who are just dedicating years and years of really hard work, just trying to do what they can, and they really, really care about them. So that was beautiful. And there was just, presentation after presentation through the morning. Then after lunch, I'm talking a bit long, and anyway, I'll get there.
No,
get to it soon.
Great story.
And then after lunch, they had a forum discussion with saying, well, all our New Zealand lizard conservation people are all here. Let's all sit in one room and let's talk about what are the most pressing needs for New Zealand lizard conservation now? Where should we be putting our energy? After hearing all about all these different projects, and what came up, one of the key guys said, and the others all agreed, he said, our number one reason beyond all these other projects, above and beyond all that, we need communication. We need people to know about these species. Nobody knows. The government's not just going to put money into these species unless the public push and demand and ask for that. So I said, so what we need is people to hear about these animals. And I was sitting in the room, and I was feeling, I was just a student, hardly knew anything about lizards or much about science communication. I said nothing in that discussion, but I was taking all of it in, and I was like, okay. And I just knew then, and it was afternoon tea, I took my cuppa, I just sat outside by myself on a wee wall, and I just knew that was me. I was like, that's me. I'm going to do that work. I feel like that's, where this has been leading me. And I would say that was a calling. That's a word I'd put on it, from my faith background, even though it wasn't to ministry as we understand ministry, but I just felt, and that's just come from there, really, that I have I wrote another couple of articles, but quite soon I decided, no, there needs to be a book about this. There's no book there to sit on our bookshelves alongside our beautiful bird ones. We really could have a book about that really celebrates all these species with beautiful photographs, and that gives time to their stories of how they're living, and also celebrates the stories of the people who have spent their time and who really care about these creatures, and we can we can learn and connect with them through the humans who love them and who know them and who really care for them the best. So that became my work for the book, was my vision. So it'd be probably 4 years ago I started doing that. And it took a lot of research. I was not a herpetologist. I was not even an ecologist. And I was not really a very well, established writer. But I just felt like it would come together okay, and it did. I read everything I could read, which actually there's not that much you can read about New Zealand lizards. Most of it's in scientific papers rather than, there's not really other books, you see. And I'd just talk to the scientists and I'd bring them up, and and they were lovely, welcoming community, really awesome people. And they would just refer me on to others who I could talk to and say, oh, if you talk to so-and-so about this lizard, give them a call, and then they'll tell me, and they'd send me things, and I'd read them, and I'd put together stories, and I loved that process. I'd get to talk to each chapter, maybe 4, 5, 6 of the scientists or the conservation workers or whoever had been most involved with the species. And then I would, in my head, try and figure out what are the strongest sort of stories in this, and what do we really want to share through this species here. And I'd put that together and try and weave an engaging story about that that also taught people about really good science about and ecology about these species. And then then I'd send that back to the scientists, get what they thought of how I was going. So I got a bit of feedback. So yeah, chapter by chapter, I just worked my way through, and and then I approached a publisher who was my number one hope of a publisher, Potton and Burton. So I've seen their books were beautiful, so I tried them, and they called back within a day, which was surprised me and said, would love to publish your book. That's the good news. The bad news is we won't make you any money. He laid it out good and straight. So but he's been wonderful to work with, and it's been a great experience. And and it came out in October. Had a beautiful gathering for a launch with lots of family and friends, and the scientists who had been involved in the book. We had a book launch in Alex, and we all went out to the sanctuary the next day. I had a beautiful time out there together. That was a really special bit of a life highlight for me, probably. And since then, I've talked to various groups about my book, and had get some lovely messages at times from people that are really just wowed by to learn these things. And I totally identify with that because I've just been wild as I've gone. So it's lovely. I'm not much ahead of the people who are reading my book on that journey of wowing at all this. So that's how I don't.
It's beautiful. If people did want to get a copy of your book, is there a best place for them to go?
I always say ask at your bookshop, because that might just encourage them to make sure they keep stocking it or get it in. They should all they can all get it. It's sort of it's in those bigger ones and smaller ones, Paper Plus and Wickles and other little ones. If you like buying online, then go to Potton and Burton, the publishers. That's better for them, and they do free postage. They charge the RRP, which is $60. So if you want to buy online, I'd recommend Potton and Burton.
Amazing.
Mm.
I love your story, and I love your journey, and I think there are so many things in it for us. But so thank you so much for sharing with us. We've got a little bit of time for questions if anyone wants to ask any questions. But I think one of the things that I find so inspiring about your story, as someone who's also not an ecologist, is that there's heaps of opportunity if you're just passionate and willing to fall in love and experience that wonder and that awe of creation, and then roll up your sleeves and get involved. And in lots of ways, that's your story. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep. And you're often going to find people, if you're interested in that science kind of aspect of it, and that, then there's likely to be people gathering around those projects who can sort of mentor you in that, which is what happened for me. I had that enthusiasm, but then others who, particularly Grant, but others as I started to get into the project, who would really point me in the right directions when I really needed to know, get the science bit of it right too. So that was for me.
Mike's made the suggestion that we could have a skink of the year's competition to maybe rival the bird of the year competition. If you had to pick a skink of the year, what would your first pick be? You got to pick a lizard.
Got to pick a lizard of the year.
Lizard of the year.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think of this really old one at the moment. I mean, that's just remarkable. They're living to 60. I've just found one that's 64 years old. It's just a little wee gecko on this unlikely island off the Canterbury coast. I mean, that's amazing. They just, little animals aren't meant to live for long times, but in New Zealand, ours do things like that. They live for crazy long amounts of time. We've got geckos that have pregnancies that take more than 2 years long. These kind of often animals, these traits go together. They're slow to get to breeding age. They live for a long time, but like pregnancy, like longer than an elephant's pregnancy. More people are wild with that, 22 months. But some of our geckos, especially in the mountains, are still in the middle of researching that. But it's going to be more than 2 years, probably pushing 3. Anyway, we've got some really amazing animals out there.
Another question is, do you have tips on making a skink-friendly place in your backyard?
That's such a good question, because that is something we can do. And nearly everywhere around New Zealand has got some little lizards, especially if you're near the edge of town or by some nature. So I say plant. So think about what plants you're planting. And the things they love are your Muhlenbeckia species that are quite Muhlenbeckia complexa or axillaris. They're kind of quite tangled sort of things with little leaves. They're quite a good ground covery one. Something like that the lizards love to dash into and hide. Some of the coprosma, especially the small leafed ones. I mean, the grasses are good too. We've got one down here, a Melicitis alpinus porcupine shrub, which is awesome for protecting lizards. But do maybe some local research because I won't know necessarily for Auckland. We should do, but yeah, so planting little lizard loving plants that the lizard love and pile up stuff, they love, so you gotta, won't always look tidy. You can make it look pretty, or you can, if you're happy with mess, just do that. But like roofing tiles, little bits of corrugated iron, all this stuff called onduline, which they love that stuff. Flat rocks, big chunks of bark or wood, anything. What you're doing is making places that they can retreat from predators. So you're thinking about the crack sizes, Go find places to bask. Don't panic too much about that. That means sunbathing, which they need to do. But it's making the little crevices, the cracks that go as far in as you can, like so big piles of stuff where they can get right away. That'll keep them, they'll help keep them warm in winter, cool in summer, and keep them away from at least those big predators like cats and stoats and rats. Mice you're still going to have a problem with because they pretty much can sneak into the wee cracks. So some people do poison mice even out around their garden in the hope that it'll help their wee lizards. And yeah, if you can keep cats away somehow, you do. And that's really hard, of course, in town. If you don't, maybe even if you don't have your own, you might have your neighbours. Some people try and put some chicken wire around their skink garden. Otherwise, even the fact that you've planted these plants, it helps protect them and you've given them some refuge, you're just upping their chances of surviving, and that's cool.
Kia ora, Anna. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe mō o whakaro ātahua, mō tō puka puka ātahua anō hoki, mō o kōrero ki a mātou te pōnei. So thank you so much for just your beautiful thoughts, the way that you think, the way that you've shared with us tonight with such just passion and excitement. Thank you for the book. That is a taonga. It's a real gift to Aotearoa New Zealand, just in general. And thank you for just what you've shared with us tonight. Yeah, I find your story so inspiring in so many ways. So I'm glad that another rōpū got to hear it and that we've got to capture this so we can share this with a bit of a wider audience as well. But ngā mihi nui ki a koe. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, kia ora, James. Yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure. Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah.
So,
Well, team, I will say a karakia whakamutunga for us, and then we will wrap up our time together. But yeah, thanks once again, Anna. Ngā mihi ki a koe, ngā mihi ki a koutou anō hoki. Ai, me inoe tātou. Nō reira, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhi ngā tahitanga ki te wairua tapu. So may the love of God, the fellowship of Jesus, the grace of Jesus and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with each of us this day and forevermore. Amen. Amen. Kia ora tātou. Thank you so much for being part of this kōrero tonight. So epic to see you all.